Organic versus conventional, is the idea worth overpaying for? Greetings to everyone who wants to understand the truth behind those trendy green labels at the supermarket. Today, we'll calmly and clearly examine one of the most controversial issues in modern nutrition. We'll explore the technological, chemical, and legal differences between organic and conventional food production, what nutritional and toxicological science has to say about this, and how to make an informed choice that aligns with your values, health, and budget. Standing at the grocery store shelf, we increasingly see a divide. On one side, familiar apples and carrots. On the other, virtually identical-looking products, but proudly labeled bio, organic, or eco, and priced 1.5 to 2 times higher. A natural question arises: what are we paying for? Real, measurable health benefits, environmental conservation, or simply beautiful words and a sense of moral satisfaction? The topic of organic products is surrounded by myths, aggressive marketing, and equally aggressive skepticism. Supporters see them as a salvation from chemicals and a path to health, while opponents see them as an expensive fad and a deception of the consumer. The truth, as usual, is more complex and lies in facts, not beliefs. To make an informed choice, you need to understand the very essence of the differences. These aren't simply tastier or healthier. These are fundamentally different approaches to how we grow plants and raise animals. This is a question of agricultural philosophy, strict legal standards, environmental impact, and of course, economics. Let's take a clear, open-minded look at what organic farming really is, compare the nutritional composition and safety of products, assess their impact on the planet, and decide when paying extra is truly justified and when you can choose conventional alternatives without a guilty conscience. The main difference between organic products begins not on the shelf, but in the field or on the farm. It is determined not by the wishes of marketers, but by strict international and national standards, such as EU Organic in Europe, USDA Organic in the US, and the Russian GeoSet standard for organic products. These standards are based on a specific philosophy: agriculture that strives to work with nature, not against it, emphasizing soil health as the foundation of everything, biodiversity, the cyclical nature of processes, for example, using animal manure to fertilize fields, and a fundamental rejection of synthetic interventions that can cause long-term harm to the ecosystem. This approach requires a deep understanding of agroecology, crop rotation, and natural regulatory mechanisms. Conventional agriculture, which produces the vast majority of food worldwide, is built on a different paradigm, maximizing efficiency and yield at any cost. Its main goal is to produce as much food as possible with minimal short-term costs and losses to meet the demand of a growing population. To this end, the entire arsenal of modern agronomic science is used: synthetic mineral fertilizers that provide plants with rapid and concentrated nutrition, chemical pesticides and herbicides for radical and rapid protection against pests, diseases, and weeds, antibiotics and growth hormones in livestock farming to prevent diseases in crowded conditions and accelerate weight gain. Key technical prohibitions in organic production clearly delineate the boundaries. First, synthetic pesticides and herbicides are prohibited. Instead, permitted natural substances such as sulfur or copper sulfate are used, but in strictly limited quantities. And, more importantly, biological methods, attracting predatory insects, using traps, and breeding resistant varieties. Second, readily soluble mineral or synthetic fertilizers are prohibited. They are replaced by organic fertilizers, compost, rotted manure, and green manure, which not only nourish plants but also improve the structure and biota of the soil over the long term. Third, genetically modified organisms, GMOs, are completely prohibited. Fourth, the prophylactic use of antibiotics and any growth hormones is prohibited in organic livestock farming. Antibiotics may only be used to treat a specific sick animal, followed by a mandatory lengthy quarantine before returning to the herd or using its products. Animals must have mandatory access to pasture, more space, and more natural conditions. Therefore, when purchasing a certified organic product, you're paying first and foremost for a controlled, documented, and regularly inspected production process, which legally excludes an entire class of substances and practices that are potentially hazardous and undesirable for you and the environment. It's a complex system that deliberately sacrifices some immediate efficiency. Organic crop yields are on average 20 to 25% lower in favor of other values. Long-term ecology, animal welfare, and the potential reduction in chemical load on consumers. When discussing the health benefits of organic foods, the first thing that comes to mind is the assumption that they are richer in vitamins or much healthier. However, modern scientific evidence, based on large meta-analyses and systematic reviews, paints a more complex and nuanced picture. Comparative studies of the nutritional value of organic and conventional foods show that there is no fundamental difference in the content of essential macronutrients, proteins, fats, carbohydrates, and most vitamins and minerals between them. For example, an organic apple and a conventional apple will contain approximately the same amount of vitamin C and potassium. Nevertheless, some patterns have been identified. Organic plant foods on average exhibit slightly higher levels of certain antioxidants and polyphenols, secondary plant metabolites that play a role in protecting against oxidative stress in the human body. One reason is believed to be that plants, unprotected by synthetic pesticides, are forced to more actively produce their own protective compounds. Additionally, studies of dairy and meat indicate a more favorable fatty acid profile in organic options, particularly higher omega-3 fatty acid content in milk and meat from grass-fed animals, which is directly related to their diets being based on pasture and grass-fed feed rather than concentrates. A much more significant and undeniable difference lies in the area of safety, specifically in the content of pesticide and antibiotic residues. This is a key argument in favor of organic products. Numerous tests confirm that organic products either contain no traces of synthetic pesticides at all, or their amounts are minimal and are due to natural background levels or cross-contamination. In conventional products, pesticide residues are almost always present, but in the vast majority of cases, their levels do not exceed the legally established maximum permissible concentrations, MPCs, which are considered safe for daily consumption throughout life. The debate among scientists and doctors is not focused on isolated exceedances, but on the potential long-term effects of regularly consuming a cocktail of many different chemicals, even in small doses, and their possible cumulative impact, especially on vulnerable groups, children, pregnant women, and people with weakened health. For them, reducing the pesticide load may be especially important. Another critical safety issue, particularly for meat and dairy products, is the problem of antibiotic resistance. In conventional livestock farming, antibiotics are often used not only for treatment but also prophylactically and as growth promoters. This directly contributes to the emergence and spread of resistant bacterial strains that can be transmitted to humans through food. Organic standards strictly limit the use of antibiotics, minimizing this risk. Organic vegetables, especially leafy greens, may also have lower nitrate levels, as the use of synthetic nitrogen fertilizers, which can accumulate in plants, is prohibited. Thus, from a nutritional standpoint, the difference is minimal, but from a safety standpoint, the reduced exposure to synthetic chemicals and antibiotics is a scientifically proven and significant advantage of organic products. Choosing between organic and conventional products also means choosing between two different environmental impact models. Each has its own environmental advantages and disadvantages, which must be assessed holistically. Organic farming is marketed as more environmentally friendly, and there are compelling reasons for this. First, the ban on synthetic pesticides and herbicides directly contributes to the preservation of biodiversity. Organic fields support a greater number of pollinating insects, bees, bumblebees, soil organisms, and birds, as chemicals do not directly kill them or poison their food chains. Second, the use of organic fertilizers, compost, manure, and crop rotation practices improve soil health. By increasing the content of humus, organic matter that retains moisture, sequesters carbon, and prevents erosion. Third, this approach prevents the contamination of groundwater and reservoirs with runoff laden with chemical fertilizers and pesticides. Thus, per unit of area, an organic farm creates a more resilient and healthy ecosystem and has a smaller carbon footprint directly on the field by eliminating the energy-intensive production of synthetic nitrogen fertilizers. However, the organic approach also has a significant environmental Achilles heel: lower yields. On average, organic fields produce 20–25% less produce from the same area than conventional ones. This seemingly trivial agricultural parameter has global environmental consequences. To produce the same amount of food, organic farming requires more arable land. The expansion of agricultural land at the expense of natural areas, forests, steppes, and wetlands is one of the main causes of biodiversity loss on the planet. Moreover, when scientists calculate the carbon footprint not per hectare but per kilogram of finished product, the picture can change. A smaller yield per unit area may mean that greenhouse gas emissions associated with production are distributed across a smaller quantity of produce, potentially increasing the carbon footprint per kilogram of organic food. Conventional agriculture, on the other hand, demonstrates superior efficiency and productivity. It allows for maximum yield from a minimum area, theoretically conserving land resources and limiting agricultural expansion. However, this efficiency comes at the cost of intensive chemicalization, leading to soil degradation, loss of fertility, salinization, eutrophication of water bodies due to fertilizer runoff, the creation of dead zones in the oceans, and direct toxic effects on all parts of the ecosystem. Thus, the environmental choice between organic and conventional production is a complex trade-off between local ecosystem health, where organics often win, and global resource and land use efficiency, where conventional farming has an advantage. Many experts see the ideal solution not as a wholesale transition to organic farming, but rather the development and implementation of sustainable, high-tech precision farming methods that combine high productivity with minimal chemical loading and respect for natural processes. The noticeable price difference between organic and conventional products isn't a whim of the sellers, but a direct consequence of the specifics of their production, which drive higher costs. The low yields of organic fields mean that harvesting the same amount of crop requires more land, seeds, and labor. Pest and weed control without synthetic chemicals requires significant manual labor or the use of sophisticated mechanization for weeding, increasing costs. The certification process required to obtain the organic label is a paid and regular procedure involving field inspections, documentation checks, and laboratory testing, which places a financial burden on farmers, especially small farms. The shorter shelf life of many organic products, untreated with preservatives, increases logistical costs and loss. Finally, the smaller scale of production compared to industrial agricultural holdings prevents economies of scale, which reduce unit costs. All of this explains why organic food is more expensive. This price barrier creates a serious social dilemma, the problem of affordability. Organic products become a de facto premium commodity, available primarily to wealthy groups who can afford to invest in healthy choices. This deepens existing nutritional inequalities, creating a situation where high-quality, clean food becomes a privilege rather than the norm. In so-called food deserts, urban areas with limited access to fresh produce, organic options are typically completely unavailable. Thus, the organic movement, originally conceived as a democratic alternative to industrial agriculture, risks becoming an elitist trend. Beyond economics, ethical considerations play a significant role, and for many consumers, they are no less compelling. Organic standards in livestock farming require more humane conditions, mandatory grazing, more space, a ban on permanent confinement in cramped cages or stalls, and access to natural light and air. For those who value animal welfare, this is a significant driver of choice. Furthermore, purchasing organic products is often perceived as supporting not large corporations, but small and medium-sized farms that adhere to principles of sustainable development and fair trade, providing decent wages to their workers. Thus, paying a premium for organic products can be seen not only as a trade-off between personal health and well-being, but also as a conscious vote for certain ethical principles of farming, animal welfare, fairness, and support for local producers. Having recognized the complexity and multifaceted nature of the issue, consumers face a dilemma: how to proceed in practice without going to extremes and ruining the family budget. The key is a strategic and prioritized approach. There's no need to rush into a wholesale transition to organics, which is practically impossible for most. It's much more effective to determine which products would benefit most from organic labeling, and for which its absence would be least critical. One of the most popular and useful tools for making this choice is the Environmental Working Group, EWG's annually updated list of the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. These lists are compiled based on an analysis of U.S. Department of Agriculture data on pesticide residues in various fruits and vegetables. The Dirty Dozen includes produce that, even after washing and peeling, is most likely to contain traces of several types of pesticides. These traditionally include strawberries, spinach, leafy greens, kale, mustard greens, nectarines, apples, grapes, peaches, cherries, pears, tomatoes, celery, and potatoes. When purchasing these crops, especially if they are consumed with the skin or in large quantities, it makes sense to consider organic options first to significantly reduce the overall pesticide load. In contrast, the Clean 15 are produce with thicker, inedible skins that exhibit minimal pesticide residues even in conventional packaging. These include avocados, sweet corn, pineapple, onions, papaya, frozen green peas, eggplant, asparagus, cauliflower, melons, broccoli, mushrooms, cabbage, kiwi, and honey. You can safely save on these by choosing conventional, more affordable versions without significantly compromising safety. Particular attention should be paid to animal products, meat, poultry, milk, and eggs. If your budget only allows for a few organic choices, it's worth focusing on these. This isn't just because of potential antibiotic and hormone residues. The latter are banned, for example, in poultry farming in Russia and the EU, but are used in the US, but also because of the cumulative effect. Animals fed organic feed can accumulate the same pesticides and other substances in their food, in their tissues, and milk. Organic standards for livestock farming require the use of organic feed, which breaks this chain. Furthermore, for families with young children whose bodies are particularly sensitive to chemical exposure, choosing organic milk and meat may be a justified precaution. The situation with fish is more complex. Organic certification for aquaculture exists, but its standards are still evolving, and wild fish, by definition, cannot be certified organic, although it is an excellent choice. It's also important to go beyond the simple organic versus conventional dichotomy and consider a third often overlooked factor: locality. Sometimes a more environmentally friendly and even safer choice can be a conventional product grown on a local farm near your city compared to an organic equivalent transported thousands of miles by air or sea. Such produce has a minimal transport footprint, CO2 emissions, is picked at the peak of ripeness, and therefore often contains more vitamins. And a small farmer, even without expensive certification, may use gentle methods simply because that's how they've always farmed. Visiting farmers markets, ordering directly from producers, or participating in community-supported agriculture (CSA) projects, where consumers pay in advance for the farm's seasonal harvest, are all ways to obtain high-quality food, perhaps even fresher and tastier, while simultaneously supporting the local economy. Finally, the biggest contribution to health and the environment can be made not by chasing labels, but by changing the structure of your diet as a whole. Increasing the share of whole plant foods, vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, regardless of their origin, and reducing the consumption of ultra-processed foods and red and processed meat will yield incomparably greater health benefits than switching from a regular to an organic burger or chips. Therefore, a smart strategy is a combination of priorities. Buying organic versions of the Dirty Dozen and key animal products whenever possible, choosing local seasonal fruits and vegetables, and most importantly, making whole minimally processed foods the basis of your diet, minimizing your intake of junk food. This is the path to mindful, healthy, and sustainable eating without overindulgence or ruin. In summary, it's clear that the debate between organic and conventional products has no clear winner. Organic is not a panacea or marketing gimmick, but a strictly regulated production system based on specific values. Its main scientifically proven advantages are a reduced burden of synthetic pesticides and antibiotics on the consumer's body, as well as a more careful approach to local ecosystems, soil, and animal welfare. However, these advantages come at a higher shelf price and a potentially larger global ecological footprint due to lower yields. Conventional agriculture, in turn, provides affordability and efficiency, but does so at the expense of intensive chemical use, which carries risks to the environment and long-term soil health. Thus, the final conclusion is that the healthiest and most responsible approach is not blind faith in the organic label, but informed and prioritized choice. Don't strive for total and often unattainable perfectionism. Focus on the actions that will bring the greatest benefit. Set priorities using tools like the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 list to direct your budget toward organic versions of the most vulnerable produce, strawberries, greens, and animal products, milk, meat. Value locality and seasonality. Often a local farm product, even without a certificate, can be fresher, tastier, and more environmentally friendly due to reduced transportation than an organic one imported from far away. Change the structure of your diet. The most powerful contribution to your health and the environment is not the choice between a regular or organic burger, but rather increasing the proportion of whole plant-based foods, vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, and eliminating ultra-processed foods. Remember that there is no such thing as a perfect food. Mindful eating is not about eating only the right foods, but about understanding the consequences of your choices and making them as carefully as possible within the limits of your capabilities and values. It's more important to eat a wider variety of vegetables than to obsess over their origin. Be flexible and use common sense, and your journey to healthy eating will become less of a source of stress and more of a full and balanced life.